Welcome to tonight's Ward 1 community meeting. My name is Bernie Schultz, and I'm the Ward 1 counselor. Tonight we are privileged to have as our presenters Chief Procurement Officer Mary Delaney on my left and Director of Public Health Steve Curry. They will make presentations and then they'll answer questions following their presentations. So let's get started. Mary's all set with her PowerPoint presentation, so Mary, take it away.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Mary Delaney, and I'm the Chief Procurement Officer for the City of Fitchburg. I have 25 years of experience in municipal government, with 21 of those as the Chief Procurement Officer. My first 15 years in procurement were spent in Gardner, and that's where I worked on our new library to start my career in the beginning. And right about at the end of my career, we built a new police station. So I had two very large projects bookending my time there. I came to Fitchburg to start my journey here in May of 2016, and I was excited to know that there was a school and a library project in the future. I was also pleasantly surprised when the first major project was the City Hall project. However, my first year here was really dedicated to improving the process, the procurement process, and the relationships between procurement and city departments. In year one, we finished a migration from a very paper-heavy process to a mostly paperless process. And we did that by using the city website to post our bids rather than issuing them in paper and mailing them, which also opened up opportunities for people who didn't really know about us. They could find us on the website and they could take bid documents and bid on our projects. So we had a lot of new bidders coming in. And then we also implemented an electronic workflow process, and that modernized our requisition process where departments now have an electronic requisition that comes in to the purchasing department to get what they need, rather than paper requisitions that would kind of float around for a couple of weeks. So requisition to a purchase order process only takes 3 days now, where it used to take a couple of weeks. In my nearly 7 years here, the department has done over 750 procurements. It's a very, very busy office. Our annual number of purchase orders is around 3,000, and we usually spend around $55 million. That's what purchasing is responsible for. Basically, everything the city and schools need to buy or build has to come through my department with my team. Tonight, I'm here to talk about the procurement role within the city. We're one of the quiet departments that you usually don't hear about often, and we like it that way. Typically, you don't hear about procurement unless something goes terribly wrong, and so I'm happy to say that we have avoided that. And we know it's not going to happen in the future because here in Fitchburg, we are dedicated to doing things right, following the process, and following the law. So what is procurement? Procurement is really just a big word that says we buy things. We buy things and we give people in our city departments the tools to build the things that they need to build. I like to say that other city departments are our customers. We don't really interact with the general public very much. We interact more with the city departments. And so since they're our customers, we strive to be the best customer service people that we can to help them out. The magic happens when our customer service leads them to a better deal, a better quality project, and a better contract or a better vendor. So I'd like to just go through the PowerPoint real quickly and tell you a little bit more about procurement. So the Chief Procurement Officer, that's my role. That's a position that's established by city ordinance. It's recognized as the individual responsible for all procurement activities. So that means supplies, services, construction, professional service contracts, contracts for designers and engineers, and also for disposing of property and equipment that we no longer use. The Chief Procurement Officer is appointed by the mayor, and we have to be registered with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The Chief Procurement Officer has to ensure that all of the procurement practices and contracts are carried out within the law. So we have some very, very strict rules. There are volumes of them that we have to follow, and we have to carry those out, or we do not have a legal procurement. Fitchburg, I'm going to say most cities, but Fitchburg especially, has a centralized procurement function. So that means that all city departments and the schools, everything goes through purchasing. And that promotes greater efficiency, we get better quality, and we have cost savings because we're buying in larger bulk. The Fitchburg procurement team works closely with all city departments to obtain what they need, and these are the key words you're going to hear from me several times, in a transparent, fair, and legal manner while protecting the taxpayer dollar. A leader is only as good as their team, and I'm fortunate to have a great team of professionals working with me here in the city of Fitchburg. My current deputy came to Fitchburg with an in-depth experience with health department contracts. She's worked on recycling, trash contracts, hauling contracts, landfill operation contracts, and she also has a lot of knowledge in public works. She focused on a lot of road and infrastructure programs and contracts in her prior job and purchased a lot of major equipment. So the deputy handles a lot of the high-value projects and also trains our department staff on our financial accounting system. So the requisition process that I talked to you about, where people need something and they put in what's called a requisition. They need, let's say they need, cases of paper, 10 cases of paper. That starts with a requisition. A requisition is just another word for a request, and that comes through our financial system electronically. So she does a lot of the training on the staff on how to accomplish that. And that's for all size projects. We also have a buyer, and the current buyer who just joined us a few months ago has a very strong skill set in vendor relations, facilities, supplies, services, contracts, and customer service. The buyer manages like the routine day-to-day things that we need. She also does all of the vendor communication, supports the facilities department, and handles all the internal communications for us. And that's to make sure that we're being efficient in our communications with everyone and we're getting back to people quickly. Oh. So how did all this procurement thing start? So back in the 60s and 70s, government contracts were very often given to people who paid people for the contracts. Let's call it bribes, payoffs. We'll be honest, bribes, payoffs, campaign contributions. Until 1969, and that was when the state found that there was a contract awarded to someone to build a campus at UMass. And before the state even knew that the campus was being built, someone already had the job. And that was done through not the best process and probably not the most legal process. And so the legislature formed a committee that was supposed to investigate that, and then the committee took payoffs. And so what ended up happening was the senators involved in that committee were indicted, and they were found guilty of extortion in federal court. So at that point, the state established what was called the Ward Commission, and the Ward Commission was an independent commission. And it was commissioned with private citizens and people who could not be influenced. And so in 1980, they came out with their report. They talked about how billions of dollars had been wasted on poor work, low-quality work, work that sometimes didn't even get done, that people were paid for, and it was done with undue political influence. There was no professional performance, and this had been the primary way that construction had been done in the state. So the Ward Commission made some recommendations, and those recommendations were adopted into law and really kind of set the foundation for what would become public procurement for construction. So the Ward Commission report is what led to all of the laws that we now follow to make sure that things go out to bid and jobs are not awarded to people who don't have the public interest at heart. The next step for that so that was construction. The next step was about supplies and services. And so the Uniform Procurement Act went into effect in 1990, and that was a collaboration between the state officials and some private organizations such as the Mass Association of Public Purchasing Officials, which I happen to be the president of right now, and some city solicitors and town councils and legal people. And the reason for that was to kind of clarify and take the mystery out of how vendors and contractors got public work, how they became vendors and contractors to the government, to the municipal government especially. A city hall or a town hall can be a very intimidating place for someone who doesn't know the inner workings. And so the reason for this Procurement Act was to take away that mystery and make procurement people more accessible to small businesses and businesses that normally would not even come and do business with the city. And so there were three premises that came out of this Uniform Procurement Act that we still follow today. Number one is uniform contracting procedures that promote competition and fairness. What does that mean? It means everyone has to be on a level playing field. So that means that we can't have preferences for vendors. We can't have relationships with vendors. You can't take gifts from vendors and promise them anything. It has to be an open and public process. You have to have fair and robust competition for larger procurements, which leads to us saving money, but also promotes integrity and public confidence in government. What does that mean? That means that the more competitors you have, the better product you're going to get in the end. If somebody is singly thinking that they're going to get work with the city, and they don't have to compete with anyone, they're going to make you pay more because they're the only player out there. And they may not give you the best quality. They may, but they may not. They might take some, take some easier ways out. When you have robust competition and you have 5 or 6 or 7 all competing for the same work, your price goes down because they're competing with each other, but also you're going to get something better because they want to prove that they're a good vendor. And then the last thing is procedures based on dollar value reflect that larger contracts merit more attention than smaller contracts and allow the municipalities to focus on larger dollars. What that means in plain language is that the laws are structured so that smaller purchases, things that are under $10,000, are easier to get. We don't have to do a formal process. We have to do something called best practices, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But the larger dollar value, the ones where you take more risk, the ones that you're spending more money and putting more of the taxpayer dollar out there, those we do a more intense process. So that's a sealed bid or a proposal. And, it allows us to focus on those bigger dollars and kind of get the routine stuff out of the way. So these are the 4 procurement laws that we follow, and I'm not going to bore you with too much in depth on them. But we have Massachusetts General Law 30B, which is supplies and services, disposal of surplus supplies, and municipal real property transactions. That means if the city ever buys and sells any property, that has to go through our office. General Law Chapter 149 is for building contracts. So that is, 4 walls and a roof. General Law 3039M is for public works, and that's anything that's not a building. So that's your roads, that's your water distribution, your wastewater pipes, and all of the infrastructure. And then finally, Chapter 7, which is design services. So, obviously when you're going to do work, you want to have plans, you want to have a design. If you're building a house, you want to have house plans. Well, in public procurement, we have designers, and we have to do a competition to make sure that we get the best designers. So those are our 4 main laws. There are some smaller ones, but these are the ones that we deal with every day. Who oversees this? This is not just the City of Fitchburg working independently. So for Chapter 30B that I just described to you for supplies and services, the Office of the Inspector General is our regulatory oversight agency. So no matter what kind of purchasing structure exists in a municipality, they oversee and have investigative authority over our procurements here in Fitchburg. they also certify people like me who are public purchasing officials through their program. So they do education, but they also do enforcement. One of the things that they do, and the Attorney General's office does as well, is something called a bid protest hearing. And a bid protest hearing is when you have multiple vendors or contractors competing for work in the city, and maybe one vendor thinks that either you did something wrong as the public agency or as the procurement officer, or they think another contractor did something wrong. And they have an avenue to actually go through a process and say, we think someone was treated unfairly here. So the Inspector General and the Attorney General both hear those protests, and whatever they decide, we have to follow. The Attorney General's office does direct oversight on all construction. So the Inspector General is supplies and services, Attorney General is construction, and then designers is overseen by the Department of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, who are responsible for all state buildings. So they're responsible for all state buildings, and they're responsible for design of municipal buildings. Why is that? Because they want to make sure that when municipalities are building buildings, they're building safe buildings, sound buildings, they're going through the right procedures. So 30B, quick overview. Anything under 10,000, as I said, is something called sound business practices. It means that we get good pricing by using the knowledge that we have on the market. We can do comparison pricing, or we can shop it out. I compare this to anything at your home. If you want to buy a new refrigerator, you're not just going to go to Home Depot, point to a refrigerator, and buy it. You're going to go and you're going to look at maybe several different places. You're going to look at the different models. You're going to decide which is going to work best for you, which is the most energy efficient. This is what we do. We don't just go and buy it. We're spending taxpayer dollar, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we're doing that in the most responsible way. So we shop things out. Anything between 10 and 50,000, we have to get 3 quotes. So that would be something like a vehicle. If we were buying a new dump truck for the DPW, we would have to find out what kind of truck we need, and we have to get 3 quotes from 3 completely different places. For a truck, you do a Chevy and a Ford and something else, but you have to compare apples to apples, so that's the quote process. And then anything over $50,000 is a sealed bid process or a proposal process. This is a very formal process. This is a process where we have to advertise. The bidders have to give us a sealed envelope that we can't open until the date and time that it's due. So that's to prevent people from looking at each other's prices. That's to prevent me, as the purchasing person, from saying to someone who's coming in, if you come down another $5, you'll beat this guy who just dropped one off. It's to maintain the integrity of the process. So we get sealed proposals. We have to open them in public. The people who bid have the right to be there when the envelopes are opened, so that, again, it's integrity, it's transparency, it's maintaining an even playing field for all of the people who are competing. A proposal is a little bit different, where we still have the sealed bid, the sealed envelope, but we can choose something that maybe costs more. So it's not necessarily the low bid, it's the best item. One of the things that I can use as an example is software. So if we were going to go out for new software for the city, we could compare different types of software to see which works better, and then look at those proposals first, and then figure out if we can afford the price that the proposer has given us. Because you don't want to just buy the low bid software if it doesn't work. Chapter 149 and 3039M for construction are very similar. So under 10,000 is the sound business practices, where we just can do comparisons. For construction, it would be more like calling 3 plumbers and saying, we have a sink that's not working, and we need someone to take care of that. We can just give them a call and we can compare. Between 10 and 50,000, again, we get written quotes. So instead of calling those 3 plumbers, we have to ask the plumbers to send us a written quote. and sign it. And then over $50,000, we can do sealed bids. There are no proposals in construction. It is all bidding. So for construction, if it's over $150,000, contractors have to be certified with the state. That means that they have all the qualifications to do the work, and the state is verifying that for us so that we don't have to go and make sure of that. They have a certificate that they turn in when they bid on our work. Anything over $1.5 million, the law requires us to have an owner's project manager. And what that means is that we have a partner. We have a firm usually that partners with the city to oversee construction projects because they are very, very complicated. And then if we have Chapter 90, and that's the money that goes into the roads that the state gives us, we are required to have the Mass Department of Transportation certify those people who do that work. So any pavers, anyone who's working on line painting, things like that, have to be certified with MassDOT. And then Chapter 7 is very simple. If your design fee or your construction are less than $300,000, then we can just hire someone. Now, they have to be qualified, they have to have all their certifications, they have to, have a proven record, but we can hire them. If they have a design fee of more than $30,000 or a construction cost of over $300,000, then we have to do a qualifications process. And what that means is they basically give us resumes, and we compare, and we see who has the best resume, and we hire accordingly. So, for all procurements and contracts, I'm going to talk again, fairness, competition, and transparency. General law requires us to have an open, fair, transparent process. There can be no secrets. There can be no deals behind the scenes. There can't be any agreements under the table. Any business is welcome to compete for the work. The city is not allowed to refuse to provide bid documents to a business. We can't refuse to accept a bid from a business. And any bid submitted in response to a procurement request has to be considered. So in other words, we know that there are bad actors out there. We know that there are some contractors that aren't great. We're not allowed to say, no, you can't bid on our project. The law says that we have to allow them to bid, we have to give them the bid documents, we have to accept those bid documents. What happens after is a different story, but we cannot refuse to do business with anyone. All procurements over $50,000 are advertised as required. They're posted to the city website. Businesses and individuals can register and will be able to get the procurement documents, and the city maintains a list of all plan holders. Why is that? Again, it's to show that we have competition. If the state says, did the city of Fitchburg actually put this out to bid, and did you actually encourage competition, we can show that it was on our website, we had a certain number of businesses take out the bid documents, this is what we got back. And then, as I said before, all procurements are subject to the bid protest process, either through the IG or the AG. These agencies actually have the ability to stop a procurement. If they feel that there's something going on, they can actually tell us to stop. You can't continue with this particular bid. You have to do it differently. We don't like the language you're using in the bid. We don't like the terms you're using in the bid. Or maybe there's a vendor that's influencing the bid. They can stop that in its tracks and make us do it all over again. They can also do some regulatory things afterwards. And so we have a lot of oversight over what we do every day. So let's talk about this. There's a quote from a movie called Armageddon that says, we're sitting on 4 million pounds of fuel, one nuclear weapon, and a thing that has 270,000 moving parts built by the lowest bidder. Makes you feel good, doesn't it? How many times do people use the excuse, well, of course that isn't good, it was the low bid? I'd like to clear that up. Let's talk about low bid and put some of that to rest. If we do a good job here in the city and we have good specifications that are well written, in other words, you don't say, I want to go buy a dump truck. You say, I need a 1-ton truck. It has to have this size engine. It has to have this kind of wheels. It needs to be an automatic. It needs to have a passenger's seat. You have to write all of these things down, but if you do a good job at all of that, then the low bid is not a problem because you have gone and you've told them what you're looking for. Now, if they don't provide it and you get that truck and something's missing, you have proof that you can return the truck. You don't have to keep it. If the procurement is competitive, low bid is not a problem. Why? Because people competing against each other will often give you more than what you're asking for or better than what you're asking for because they're competing. That's the good thing about competition. If you have a bunch of athletes in a race, they're always trying to do better for the next race. That's what we have our vendors and contractors doing. They want to do better. They want our work. There's a lot of money in government work. If the contract contains minimum quality standards, performance standards, and expectations, low bidder is not a problem. What does that mean? You ask them to reach a minimum standard. You ask them to have a performance or some kind of outcome. You don't just say, here's a broom, sweep the room. You say, here's a broom. When this room is done being swept, it should be clean. There should be no dirt. There should be no dust. It should all be put in a trash barrel, and it should be taken off site. You have to put those expectations in. If the municipality performs due diligence in their reference checks and verifying performance, then you're not going to have a problem with the low bid. Reference checks are a real thing. We do them every day. We do them with all of our contractors. In some cases with construction, they're required to have references with the state. And the state verifies that those references are bona fide references for us to use. And so if we do a good job and we check those references, the low bidder is not going to be a problem. After all of those things, the low bidder should be a responsible bidder if we do our job. And I'm going to say again, responsible cannot be determined in advance according to procurement laws. So I can't say someone's not responsible before they've put in the bid. I can only say they're not responsible after I've considered their bid. Contract administration. So we've done your whole job and you have somebody under contract now. If a contract is awarded and we haven't followed the rules, it's not a valid contract. We don't have to pay the bill. We can't pay the bill. That's a dangerous place that I've seen other cities and towns have, where they have had a vendor do a lot of work for them and then had to say to them, I'm sorry, we can't pay you because we didn't do the right process to get here. Cities and towns all have their own statutes with regards to contracting. In Fitchburg, a contract isn't valid unless the mayor has signed the contract. Municipal contracts can't be auto-renewed. You've all had that. You have a subscription for Time Magazine, and you just keep getting it even though you don't want it anymore because it auto-renews. Municipalities can't do that. It's not legal for us to do that, and we can refuse. And then contracts that go for more than 5 years need to be approved by the City Council. All city departments have been told about the importance of contract management. Contract management means that once you have a building in process, or once you have your supplies, or once you have your services, you need to make sure that you're still getting what you're paying for. If you have a lawn service that you pay to come out and check your grass weekly and do fertilizer or do watering or do trimming, and you sign the contract and then you never check to make sure that they're coming, then what use is that contract? So all of our city departments know about the importance of contract management. It means that we don't pay for more than the contract requires us to pay. It means the quality and the performance that we promised is being met. And it also establishes our own references for future. So we have experience with certain people that it's great. Then in the future, when they bid again, we know they're great. If we have someone that we know is terrible, then in the future we know they're terrible. So what's ahead for us? Procurement is a field that has been dominated by a lot of large businesses. My department is going to be engaging to welcome diversity and inclusion in the very near future. We have a lot of contract opportunities here, especially in the areas of facilities and building maintenance. And a lot of times that work is awarded to contractors that are out of town or large contractors. We are looking for Fitchburg area businesses and vendors. So if you know people, send them our way, send them to the website. We are looking for people who can offer us competitive pricing because the local economy, the local businesses are good for the businesses and are good for Fitchburg. I know even at home, if you want to hire a local contractor or a vendor, wouldn't you prefer to have someone who's your neighbor doing your work than having someone from far away? We would like to welcome small businesses, minority businesses, and disadvantaged businesses to begin to compete more for our municipal contracts. So please send them our way. In closing, the city is obligated to make the best and responsible use of taxpayer funds. The procurement team's mission is to uphold the law while conducting the best practices and acting in the interests of the city and the taxpayers. Our way of doing business is open, fair, and transparent, allowing competition and getting the best quality for the best price. And to the extent that we are legally able, we will assist any business who comes to us and work with them through the process. Here's my contact information. Thank you for listening. I know sometimes procurement can be a little bit dry, but it is an important part of the way we do business in the city. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Do we have any questions for Mary? There's a lot of information presented. Jacqueline?
Yeah, it's more, I guess, a comment than a question. I feel that Waste Management has failed multiple criteria. They haven't assigned sufficient personnel and trucks to the city. They have many times failed to pick up the yard waste in particular, which has been documented in See, Click, Fix. And I think other forms of reference the city may have access to should include resident feedback on what a poor job they've done. You mentioned local businesses. They're based in Texas, and I feel they definitely take us for granted, and we need to change.
Thank you for the input. As I said, prior to the next procurement, I'm not able to say to you that we're going to be rejecting or not allowing anyone. We do have to allow that process to go through as prescribed by law. What I will say is that input from residents, although you are welcome to do so, there is a law regarding that, and we are obligated by case law to take any third-party information that we get and provide all of that to the person who's bidding, obviously, and they do have the right to to come back and tell us their take on that. And so any third-party information that we receive from residents, whether that be in emails or phone calls, does need to be provided to any vendor. It's not just in this particular instance. In all vendors, we need to provide that to them. Under the law, they have to be treated fairly and equally. What that means, and I should have talked about this when we do references, is that if we have 3 or 4 people competing for something like a trash contract, and we do check references on one, we have to do the same exact reference checking on all, and they have to be compared on equal footing. So if we seek 4 references from company A, company B, company C, and company D also have to have 4 references checked. And so maintaining fairness in that whole process is very important.
I could hear a point about the yard waste you brought up. That was very awful this year. It was terrible. That's what I hear about. It was all, I could see one day, 2 days, years ago. Now it was weeks. It would sit out there. 3 weeks. And when you have a house that doesn't have access to woods, or doesn't have a truck and all that stuff, and you're depending on these people to pick it up, and it just makes the city look bad when you have piles in front of everybody's house. So I just hope that next time, I mean, the last time the city workers were out picking it up, offer the overtime to the city workers and let them do it before you all get a contract. That's all an option maybe.
I'd like to piggyback on what that gentleman just said. My yard waste stayed out there 5 weeks. I raked all those leaves by myself. I'm 76 years old. And one of the things I was most concerned about was all the rain and all the wind. And a lot of stuff was just soaking wet. And then the day that they finally came, it happened to be a waste management truck. I had 3 barrels and 7 bags. And they picked up the bags, and I was standing there in my living room looking out the window. And they picked up 2 of the barrels, got it in the truck. And the 3rd barrel did not have a hole in the bottom of it. So it weighed a lot. So it was full of water. And so one guy tried to pick it up, put it back, and he started getting in the truck. So I went out there, and I said, whoa, wait a minute. 2 of you lay that thing on its side, let the water come out, and then pick it up and get it in the truck. Because most of that weight is water. And he said, no, lady, your address is going to be on a list. So it was I'm going, a list? What? Didn't know anything about a list. I was quite upset. They did treat me with respect, probably more than I treated them. And what was so ironic is later on in the day when I went out, there it was, the barrel was down, and the water was out of it, and I alone picked up the barrel. So if they had waited just a couple seconds, I mean, the sidewalk does have a little bit of a list to it right in front of my house. If they had waited 2 or 3 minutes, they could have picked up that barrel and got it in the truck. The next morning, I left to go to the senior center. I came back, and the barrel was empty. I don't know if they picked it up. I don't know if the city picked it up. At that point, I didn't care. It was gone, But there were a couple other houses that I passed rather regularly. There was one on the corner of South and Pine. They had 7 barrels, 6 or 7 bags out there. They were all ripped, they were torn, they were wet. I'm thinking to myself, I hope those poor people aren't going to have to clean that mess up after Waste Management hasn't come for all these weeks. We're talking 5 weeks. And every time I look, I'm on the app so that I get the announcements, and it kept saying waste, yard sale, yard waste, no. And then finally I called, and I happened to talk to one of our city councilors at large, and I mentioned it to her. So when I called, she said, the person I spoke to on the phone, who was very nice to me, said, oh, that address has already been reported. And I felt like saying, okay, yeah, I'm sure it has been. But I said, I want it in there twice. And she said, okay. She was very sympathetic. She said, I understand what you're going through. And I said, well, it's just not only me. And one of the things that was so irritating, and I'm sorry for taking up so much time, but one of the things that was so irritating is I'm on Maple Crest Avenue. It's a 3-house, it's a little short, and my driveway is almost longer than the street. Everett Street in Fairbanks, those have been picked up after 3 weeks. But nothing on Maple Crest Avenue had been picked up. I'm thinking, short streets or something. But I was very dissatisfied with their service this year. I couldn't be more dissatisfied with it. I'm sure that's not the first time you people have heard that.
If I might comment on that, I agree. The yard waste in the fall collection was disastrous. It was quite embarrassing to drive around the city to see the large amount of bags out there. So I understand your frustration. I was even more frustrated to witness that type of activity. I do hope we never have to go through that again. And I personally, well, for what it's worth, I personally apologize for that lack of service.
You don't have to apologize to the two guys who didn't take my suggestion. You just putting the barrel on the side for a minute.
Sorry to interrupt. It wasn't only the lack of service, the lack of communication was also disastrous. So I pressed quite hard on them to plan and give me the plan so that I may convey it via recollect and tell you when your yard waste was going to be collected. But as soon as I got a report, things changed in 24 hours, and then I'm sending another report on top of another. I agree. It was disastrous. No argument there.
Do they not have enough employees?
Well,
Or do we know?
this fall was a series of things, and I'm not going to sit here and make excuses for them because, believe me, I've been beat to a pulp. Couple of things happened. Yeah, they were on the brink of not having enough employees to begin with, and then an injury occurred during the first week of the fall yard waste collection, which put them behind. So now they were trying to, are understaffed, so now they were trying to pull trucks from various different areas with drivers that weren't familiar with the area. They were missing entire neighborhoods, let alone just streets. The folks just didn't know where they were going. Whole host of problems. Lack of communication. Management didn't know what the drivers are doing. The drivers don't know what the management's doing. If they can't communicate with each other, then I certainly am out in the cold trying to convey information to you folks, and it changed so quickly. It was just disastrous.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question.
Contractors, next year, either. This company.
Well,
to what you say, you know if they've already did a lousy job, why would you want them back? To your quote, you said that in one of your presentations, right? If they're good, yeah, we want to make sure they come back. If they're like crap, see you later, bye. Like,
I have a question. Is it possible? Because, okay, I must admit, I have never had a problem with my waste pickup. Never. I know other people have. I have not. Maple Crest Avenue is boom. By noon today, everything was gone. No problem. Is that a contract where we get both yard waste and trash, or can that be split? So we keep the contract for the part that works, and we get rid of the contract for the part that doesn't work. Is that a doable, or does it have to go hand in glove? It can't be separated?
A few of the, and
I was going to say,
Mary will have the answer on that, but a few of the waste companies that I've spoken to and trying to call around to try to get a substitute suggested that. And that's kind of a nice, if it's legal according to procurement, it would be kind of nice to have a backup in case that happens. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
That's okay. So, Director Curry and I work very closely together, and we happen to have a meeting tomorrow, actually, to start looking at the next contract and to decide, what needs to be changed, what can we do better. And so I think it's going to be a process over the next few months of developing a contract and an approach that's going to work best for the city residents. And it could include separating. There are ways that we could do that. I will say that, I don't know if anyone knows this, but trash contracts are exempt from these laws that I told you about. We don't actually have to do a process at all. And the city of Fitchburg has always opted to do an open process to see if we can get better competition. And, there are a lot of very large trash companies out there. And across the country, though, there's 3 or 4 in every market. So you're very limited as to how much competition you're going to get. And if you look at the news, all of the trash companies are having similar problems, maybe not so bad as Fitchburg, but I think Lowell had a very serious problem there. So, we're all looking at how we can do this better. The Department of Environmental Protection is putting on a training in January that Steve and I are both signed up to go to, because I think the state has realized also that this is something that's becoming a serious problem for municipalities. It's a health problem. This isn't just someone, not showing up to cut your grass. This is a health issue. So, we're going to take advantage of any resources we can get that are offered to us from the state and do the best we can for the next contract. And we will have an open process, even though it's not required.
Thank you, Mary. We got a question, Jen?
When is Waste Management's contract up?
End of this fiscal year, which would be June 30th, 23. So we do have one more yard waste season in the spring. Actually, we have a collection in January for Christmas trees. Yeah.
When's it be out there, January 2nd? Actually, I take that back, December 26th.
Well, I did have a meeting with them last week to discuss the January and the spring collection, and I asked them to tell me when they had the most staffing. You pick the yard waste weeks, and you tell me when you have enough staffing to do that, rather than us picking the weeks and setting ourselves up for disaster again. So hopefully that is helpful, but I've thrown a few irons in the fire with other waste companies, so nobody really has trucks sitting around with staffing ready to pick up yard waste at the drop of a hat. There's planning that needs to be involved, but hopefully many of the companies see what's going on and maybe they can step in the future. Who knows?
Question. Or someone said Waste Management is homed in Texas. Is that correct? Is that what I heard?
What was the terminology?
Aren't their main offices in Texas? It's a company in
Correct.
Texas.
Well, they have local main offices, one in West Boylston and one at Gillette Stadium.
Word this. Is this a situation where their local offices are saying to Texas, we got a problem here, Houston, and Texas is going, hey, you're on your own?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
That's inner. Yeah. But all I know is when I saw the city trucks with backhoes, and that's the only way they could pick up some of those bags and get them in a dump truck.
DPW was tremendous in cleaning up that mess.
They really did have some messes too.
There was a little concern that we would have, and luckily we didn't, but we would have had these weather events while the yard waste was at the curbside. Would have been even more disastrous.
One of the things I kept doing is we'd have a rain and then it would get really cold and windy.
Frozen.
And I thought, I don't want them to freeze. So I was constantly picking up the bags and piling them up on top of each other or putting them on the barrels and then going, then the next day go down, take them out, put them back down on the ground. And I thought, this is, for 5 weeks I did that. It was ridiculous. My neighbors probably thought, she's out there again moving those bags.
It got very difficult to manage too, because I give a list every day of the reported missed collections, and the lists were long. They couldn't get them done. They couldn't catch up, and just kept falling farther and farther behind. So yeah.
Mary, I had a question about the the small minority, disadvantaged people that you're going to try to attract. And you know, you know, in your presentation, you talked about your deputy and your buyer. Are there other members of the team that can help these people, you know, with the whole process? Because it's not, as you described, it's not an easy process. There's a lot of laws that have to be observed. I was just wondering how that might all play out.
Yeah, so we've actually done some presentations in the past with the local Chamber of Commerce that we want to expand upon. Both of my team members are trained and know how to help businesses to fill out the paperwork. One of the things that we've done probably in the last 2 years more than ever is try to reduce the amount of paperwork that these people have to fill out to get work with us. You know, it's paper heavy. It's, even though we have a paperless, it's forms heavy. The state requires us to ask for certain things, so we're trying to, you know, make that easier and make it in more plain language so that it's easier to understand. You know, honestly, I never thought that I would ever end up working in local government because I was one of those people that used to be intimidated walking into my city hall as a high schooler. You know, I hated when my dad used to send me with the tax bill to pay, you know. And so it can be intimidating for people who've never done business. So we're trying to do a lot of things. We're trying to reduce the paperwork. This past couple of years, we had our snowplow contracts translated into Spanish. Not that the contracts themselves are being signed in Spanish, but so that they would understand the terms and conditions. We have a lot of people in the city who are very capable of doing the work, but government terms and conditions are hard to understand for someone who speaks English, never mind if English is their second language. And we've had a really good response from that. So the team members, yes, will be working with businesses. We'll be reaching out through the chamber. We're also going to be talking to some of the community partners that we have. You know, people like Mock, you know, some of the Spanish American Center, and see if we can just go and have an hour or two there where people can come and talk to us. And so, yes, it's a very real thing. We are very, very interested in doing that, and we will take any advice that anyone has as well.
That brings up a question for snow removal. Do you tend to have the same contractors do the same neighborhood year after year if possible? The reason I'm asking is a couple years ago, in my opinion, whoever did Maple Crest Avenue did a lousy job. One thing up the middle of the street, and that was it. Then we got a new truck. It was a different truck. He did curb to curb, and he, you know, cleaned up the corners. He was great last year and the year before, and I'd like to ask him.
That would be more of a question for the DPW commissioner, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not in charge of snow removal.
Yeah, I will say that they are, we work closely with DPW on those contracts, and they do a lot of route supervision where they go and they check on various contractors. And so it could be,
Again, whoever he is, I don't care.
Yeah.
Let's keep him.
Jacqueline, you had one more question?
Yes, you had mentioned that the state reforms came about because of money going to politicians, including campaign contributions. You said that people in city government are not supposed to take gifts from vendors, and yet our mayor has received a campaign contribution from Waste Management. Can anything be done about that to prevent that going forward?
It's not really something I can comment on.
That would be
I
something.
guess maybe I'll ask Councilor Schultz then, because I know that in November, just last month, the city of Portland, Maine overwhelmingly passed a municipal campaign finance law which prevents corporations from donating to municipal candidates to prevent this type of thing from happening. Are you willing to pursue something like that in Fitchburg?
I'll have to take it under consideration, Jacqueline. I haven't really given it much thought. So, and you know, as far as the mayor commenting on that, you'd have to ask the mayor. I know he would be happy to sit down and discuss it with you if you have the time. Okay, I guess we're ready. Mary, are you all set? We can go on to Steve now?
Absolutely.
Steve's going to talk about some of the positive things that
Well, not all of them are positive.
well, at least most of
Positive
the
responses.
Positive responses.
So Councilor Schultz asked me to just point out some of the things that are going on in the health department. So I'm just going to briefly, there's several divisions, so I'm just going to pick a couple of items, hot items in each of the divisions. Sorry. Right now, as folks may know, the City Council is working on, or actually close to passing, a vacant building ordinance where folks have to register their vacant properties. We've had a vacant property registry through the Board of Health. However, now that's strictly just a residential ordinance. So now the City Council has amended that ordinance so that it will include commercial property. And that ordinance hopes to put or incentivize ownership, especially downtown, and make decisions and try to move properties. If not, they will be forced annually to register them. Tongue-tied. And we are looking at establishing a computer program in open.gov to ease that permitting process. The annual fees escalate, so that will in itself incentivize, hopefully, owners to either rehab their buildings or sell them and move them. So that's something to look for in the near future. I believe the council is probably going to pass that ordinance. I believe it's on its first reading sometime early next year. I know folks have noticed that we now, the state has passed a mattress and box spring and textile ban, so we can no longer put mattresses in our landfill, which is a good thing. However, it has sort of created an uptick in illegal dumping because there is now fees associated with dumping a mattress or disposing of a mattress in a box spring. So I just want to let folks know that we are working with the police and the DPW. We have purchased cameras. We have another camera going up into our hot spots. So we intend on trying to deter dumping as well as catch those that committing a crime. I just want to say that there is options to dispose of a mattress. All of them have fees. It's a state mandate now. But our landfill can accept them. You do need to purchase a pass from the department, health department. That can be done online, or it can be done in person. There is a new business, and it just happens to be in Fitchburg that just opened up. Tough Stuff Recycling at 145 Authority Drive. You can dispose of mattresses. I believe they're $25 if you bring them there. And then Tough Stuff also has a curbside collection option, so I encourage folks to look at their webpage and portal and make arrangements. If they can come out and actually collect the material, that's great. Fees are a little greater than $25. However, we are looking at, with procurement's help, Mary's office, we are looking at whether it's a good idea to establish some sort of a contract with some of these mattress recyclers so that we can explore the possibility of reducing the fees so they're not so tough to meet. That's something that should happen hopefully in the next few months. So I wanted to talk about mattresses. And another thing that the housing folks are doing in the office, they are continuing to work with our Attorney General's office at the state level. Attorney General's has a great program for vacant residential properties. So we will continue to work with them. We utilize the receivership program in the Worcester County Housing Court, and basically the Attorney General's and our legal team offices try and assist with those properties that have been vacant for a long time. We put the properties into receivership, which essentially appoints a person in charge of the property. They take over and they make repairs to the building or do what's necessary to the building to stop it or abate it from being vacant or prolonged vacancy. It's been a great program. We've started with the Attorney General in 2015, and since then we've had over 70 properties either been sold, rehab, or in the process of rehab since the partnership started. So it's a great program. As far as our nursing and epidemiology program, our vaccinating coordinator continues to hold COVID clinics every Friday at the library. That's in collaboration with Transformative Healthcare. It's every Friday from 1 to 5. We've actually expanded the hours because we've had a little bit more interest in vaccination recently. Actually, last Friday we had almost 80. So our communicable disease investigation team, which is formerly the contact tracing team, in collaboration with Community Health Connections, or the CHC, are out contacting churches and housing authorities and businesses to see if they like to hold clinics within their business. So if you folks know or would like to be a part of vaccinators coming to your business or church, that has been a successful program, and that's being offered by our investigation team, our communicable disease team, and it also includes flu vaccine at these sites. So you can sign up on the webpage, or you can just walk into one of these facilities, provided they are public facilities. Most of the ones in December this month are private, but you can go to the library if is necessary. We do also offer COVID kits free in the office while supplies last. You're welcome to come to the office. We actually have them in just about every office that deals with the public in City Hall. As far as waste collection goes, we are collaborating with the procurement office and excited to announce that we are going to be installing monitoring devices, groundwater and gas monitoring devices in our Blueberry Lane landfill, which is located off of Airport Road next to the airport. This was a landfill property from 1968 to 1971. So we will be installing monitoring devices and meeting the requirements of landfill closure, today's requirements. Landfill closure back in that day was much different, but kind of nice to move forward and get what we're supposed to be doing on that landfill going. I'm also excited to announce that our Fitchburg Westminster landfill has begun construction. They will be going higher. So the expansion hopefully will give us another 6 years of landfill life till 2030. And while we do that, we will continue to negotiate with DCR, which is the State Department of Conservation and Recreation, so we'll be seeking land that we can trade. There's presently 85 acres of DCR land abutting the landfill, and we're looking for some property, hopefully 3 times the 85 acres that we can trade off for expansion of the landfill, further expansion beyond 2030. We're also working with, as we mentioned, a curbside contract. Hopefully we can work on improving the language so that we don't have another episode like we did this fall with our yard waste collection. I won't spend up too much time on that. We've kind of already beat that up a little bit. I would just like to mention, and I believe you mentioned it, we do have an app in the city. A large part of the problem with yard waste is, and in collection, is folks don't know when their collection is. So I encourage folks to sign up for Recollect. You can put it on your smartphone. You can receive notices. If you don't have a smartphone, you can also receive notices to a landline. And you can also go on the webpage and print a calendar for collection. It's a very useful tool. And right now, over 9,000 people have signed on to it, and 400,000 people have viewed it since 2018. 6,000 people are printing a calendar on a regular basis, and 41,000 people have viewed the site for the very first time since 2018. So people are using it, and I encourage to utilize it. As far as administration goes in the office, we're currently interviewing for a weights and measures position in the city. We have about 5 or 6 candidates, which is great because we've gone about a year and a half advertising the position with very little interest. This is a mandated position. The duties have been assumed by the State Division of Standards since 2004. Basically what happened in 2004, Weights and Measures was its own department back then. The individual that ran the department retired, and the position was just never replaced. It was cheaper to go with the state and pay a contract and have them do it. But the state no longer has the ability to do it, and it's actually a mandated position. So we hopefully will have somebody in place within the next month or so. As far as food inspection goes, we do have a new food inspector. Well, he's actually coming up on a year now, anniversary at the beginning of 2023. Right now he is finishing up on his second round of inspections for calendar year 22. He continues to streamline permitting for those eating facilities. And it's actually become quite the smooth process to renew your permit. So any questions on that, we encourage to let us know if there's any problems. He's been a great addition to our team, and he's very quick at picking up tasks. And finally, just mention our outreach and prevention team will be holding a Narcan training this coming Wednesday at December 14th. It is being held in the Senior Center. I'll put these flyers out. At 6:30, we will have, this coming Wednesday, we'll have resource tables, and at 7, the training begins. And this is at the Senior Center on Wednesday. I also have cards if folks would like to reach out to the Fitchburg Health Department Fitchburg Street Outreach Team. There are actually 2 individuals who go out and try to work with our homeless. If they have some sort of a substance abuse problem, they try to get them services. And at the very least, if we can get them out of the cold for a few hours, that's on the agenda too. But I encourage folks to attend the Narcan training, and if they would like to take a card, it has many of the services on the back of the card that the outreach team offers our disadvantaged individuals out in the field. I appreciate you giving me the 10 minutes or so to whatever it was for updates.
I don't have any need for going or getting a permit for the landfill dump. However, I have been told I don't have a pickup. And somebody had told me once that even if you have a permit, if you try to drive in there in a vehicle that is like, for instance, my son lives in New Hampshire. He has a pickup. Let's just say, this is not reality right now for me, but let's just say I had a permit and he said, yeah, Ma, I'll take the stuff. If I was sitting in the truck with him, could we dispose of something there, or because it's a New Hampshire truck, he'd be turned around immediately?
So residential permits are actual stickers that are adhered to the windows of the vehicle. In that situation, you could purchase a landfill day pass. Doesn't matter what vehicle you bring. It doesn't matter where it's registered. You just can't bring a vehicle such as a box truck or a vehicle which you can't view the material that you're bringing. So it doesn't matter on the vehicle for a landfill day pass. It does for a residential sticker.
Let's put it this way, I don't think I'll ever need it, but just out of curiosity, so if I had to, say if I finally decided to clean my cellar, I could say, hey, Corey, I'll get a day pass and let's go get rid of it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And that can be purchased online as well. Or in the office, of course. Sure.
Mattresses, they lived all over the city. I live on Forest Street, corner of Forest and Charles. Been one sitting there now 2 weeks. There's one up on Pine Street with a box spring. That's been sitting up there for 2 weeks. Who the hell, who do we call? We call the Board of Health for that? Let them know?
I'm aware of those mattresses. The inspectors have ordered the property owners to remove it. If it's not removed, then we have to take steps. There's several methods of enforcement. Yeah.
I was getting nervous. So.
That's unfortunately, we have to give them time.
Oh, no, I understand. As long as I understand the process, I won't call them if that's already been notified to.
You can certainly let us know in the office. I am aware of those, however. And if it goes lengthy, we will arrange removal and we will collect them and dispose of them. And we would have to put a lien on the property for the costs that are incurred.
One other question.
Sure.
Was there ever, or will there be, a time limit on abandoned buildings in Fitchburg? We see a lot of these, like there was a bad fire last summer and on Wood Street, just around the corner from us. And I was walking by that the other day. But I've seen buildings around the city that I know have been abandoned for years. I'm assuming that whoever owns it continues to pay the taxes. There's one on Nashua Street that's been 50 years, but this particular one, I see some kids playing in the yard, and that bothers me because children. But is there a time frame that the owners have to?
Well, ultimately, when there's a fire, especially a fire, we try to put a lien against the proceeds of the property insurance. Unfortunately, you're not required to have property insurance. So in a lot of those cases, well, first of all, the insurance companies take forever to, yes. So a lot of times those circumstances, we've seen years for the insurance company to pay out. We do, in some cases, we do have liens against the proceeds, which means if they issue a check for repair of the building, the city of Fitchburg is a payee on the check. So we'll withhold funds until there's a reasonable plan to rehab the building. Some cases, there's no insurance on it. So we're chasing it in housing court, which is a long process as well. Oftentimes we'll utilize the Attorney General's office for assistance. Sometimes it's scary getting a letter from the AG's office. But we've tried.
Process, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So it does take time. I'm just curious.
Unfortunately, sometimes it takes a real long time. But we are working in the city. In fact, we have a meeting on Wednesday to start talking about demolition for the upcoming fiscal year. And we're forming a list again, and we'll start putting together through Mary's office some bids for demolition, depending on how much money we will have. But yeah, I share your frustration there too.
Any other questions before we?
Someone told me she thought you'd be retiring soon. Is that true?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm too young. I want me out that bad?
This is what I heard from someone in city government. So I figured I'd come to the source and ask you.
I have new plans. Sorry, I'm too young. I'd love to, don't get me wrong, but I also love the job.
I do have another question.
Sure.
The city dump, I have a dump on it, so I go up there often. Is that ours, or does it belong to Westminster?
The landfill?
Do we lease that, the one up in,
It's a little complicated. There's several lots. Some of them are city lots, some of them are town of Westminster lots, and most of them are owned by Waste Management.
I'm just curious, I didn't know if it was ours, theirs, or whose.
It's owned by the city,
Okay.
but I will say the reason why we collect host fees is because they need our property to get to theirs.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Mary, and also Steve, for your excellent presentations and the answers that you provided to the questions from the audience. Our next Ward 1 meeting will be not on a Monday, it's going to be on a Thursday because of the way the new year falls and the holiday falls on a Sunday. So our next meeting is going to be Thursday, January 12th, 2023. We'll be in
Sounds
another
funny.
year. Yes, doesn't it? It does. And thank you all for coming tonight, and good
Yes,
night.
thank you.
Thank you.